before we go on to the tab 2 of the Code of Professional Responsibility, it occurs to me that what we were looking at were Washington state laws, right? And we are also bound to follow federal laws too, and there's some federal laws that apply to us. So I'm going to give you that. And so I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, okay? I just want to bring it to your attention. And so there's no testing and certification requirements for the state of Washington to become a signing agent, but there are things that we need to follow or abide by. And the first one, we have to, obviously we're gonna obtain our notary commission, right? And there's no testing or training or certification requirements, but we're responsible for maintaining our commission, bond, and meeting any requirements for the hiring company. So even though state of Washington may not have requirements, whoever hires you, especially if it's a lender, they're gonna need to know, they need you to have the background check, right? Because they're a lender, they've got responsibilities to their borrowers. So we need to obtain a background screening, obtain the annual signing agent errors and emissions bond. We need to become and stay current on on laws and regulation, including the RCWs and WACs, and including the federal laws and regulations. We need to become familiar with closing documents. We don't have to memorize them, or we don't have to know them in and out, but we need to know what they are and what their purpose is. That's what's expected of us. And then stay informed of any changes in our profession. So some of the laws that pertain to you as a notary signing agent, these are laws that affect lenders, and so they indirectly also pertain to us because we're coming to the borrower's house and we're signing paperwork with them. So this also kind of applies to us as well, pertains to us. So the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, and that's about, they need to explain what their information sharing practices are. So they're gathering all this information from the borrower, and they need to be able to state to the borrower, well, what exactly are they doing with all this information that they're gathering? So that's the number one. The Truth in Lending, TILA, protects the borrowers against inaccurate and unfair credit billing and credit card practices. It requires lenders to provide you, when it says you, that means the borrower. It requires lenders to provide the borrower with loan cost information so that they can comparison shop for certain types of loans. The RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, provides consumers with improved disclosures of settlement costs to reduce the cost of closing by the elimination of referral fees and kickbacks. And then together, the TILA-RESPA Integrated Disclosure, also known as TRID, it simplifies information by combining 4 forms into 2 easy-to-understand documents, the loan estimate and the closing disclosure. And so there's a URL there. If you want to find out more about what is the Truth in Lending Integrated Disclosure, you can go to that site and find out some more. Some people are like that. Some people are just so thirsty and hungry for information. They want to know the hows and the whys and the whats. And so if you want to listen to that, this video is more directed, I think, for loan professionals, but it doesn't hurt us to watch it, just so we can understand it. The number 5 is the FACTA, the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act. So it talks about, the Act stipulates requirements for the information privacy, accuracy, disposal, and limits the ways the consumer information can be shared. And so there again, remember that question about, is it okay if I have a copy of the documents that I certify? This is another reason that the answer is no, is because of this act. We're prohibited. We have to protect the recorder's or the borrower's private information, and we're restricted on the ways that they can share it. Number 6 is this is a long one. uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, otherwise known as the USA Patriot Act. Did you know that the Patriot Act had, meant all those things? Because I didn't. Anyway, so that's the Patriot Act form, and it's used to help the government fight the funding of terrorism and money laundering activities. And federal law requires all financial institutions to obtain, verify, and record information that identifies every customer. And that is why we cannot rely on credible witness to identify somebody. We cannot rely on our personal knowledge to identify anybody in a loan signing, right? So this is the Patriot Act is what requires them to have the actual document, driver's license, passport, whatever government issued ID that they have. And then number 7, what is price fixing and why is it illegal? And so price fixing is an agreement, either written, verbal, or inferred from conduct among competitors that raises, lowers, or establishes prices or competitive terms. And so on and on and on. So the bottom line is I kind of put, there's a website there if you want to find out more about that. But the bottom line, I put an arrow, it says the Antitrust Act prohibits competitors of any profession from getting together to set or discuss fees. And so how that pertains to us is we can't in this setting discuss or agree or set fees at all. So I'm going to only talk generally about prices, because one of the questions that's going to pop up, I know it's a question that I had when I started out as a signing agent is, how much should I charge? And that's a big ambiguous question. And so I can't tell you how much you should charge other than to say, I learned the hard way, and these signing companies who will no doubt be reaching out to you, they're in business to make money. They get a certain amount from the lender or the title company, and then they have to they want to deal out the assignment as quickly to at the lowest price to the signing agent. And so keep that in mind. So whoever's calling you to hire you, understand who they are and where they're coming from. Obviously, if they're only getting, like, I'm just going to throw numbers out. Say you're a notary signing company and this title company has hired you and they're going to pay you a $200 flat rate to get this job done, to get this signing done. Well, now you've got to hire a notary signing agent, and this signing service could be in any state in the United States, right? That's why we get lots of out-of-town calls. And so they're calling you in Washington, hi, here's the price we're willing to pay for this. And because they want to keep their profit margin nice and big. So keep that in mind when you're figuring out how much to charge. Understand, what does it cost you to be in business? What does it cost you to do that signing? And charge accordingly, because we are not nonprofits. Those companies, those signing agent companies, they are not nonprofits. A bank is not a nonprofit. They're all in it to make money. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. We're in business to be in business, and so if we're taking the rock bottom fee, the rock bottom rate, does that mean that our liability is any less? No. Our liability is the same as if we're charging a premium price or if we're taking the rock bottom price. Our liability is the same. So make sure you're charging enough so that you can stay in business, because I imagine there's quite a turnover of signing agents. Otherwise, why are they, where do they go, right? So there's people that have been in it for a long time, and they're smart. And how do they stay in business? They know what to charge. They know how to charge enough to stay in business. I think it's the new people that come in thinking they get this expectation that they're going to make all this money, but then they're offered this price down here, and you can't stay in business. I don't see how it's possible to stay in business if you're accepting minimum wage. How do you profit? How do you do it? So that's all we're going to say about that. As far as how much should you charge? Well, that's the big question mark every signing agent encounters when they start out, and you just have to figure that out for yourself, how much you're willing to charge. And I just say, find out what the scope is. How many signers are there? What type of signing is it? How far do I have to travel to do it? Are there scan backs? Are there scan backs? So all those things, because when I get an assignment, if I've got to then, after I do the assignment, and then our document's ready. I always ask that question. If I get an assignment and I have to know what are my boundaries. I'm like, if I just say yes to every assignment, well, what have I just said yes to? I've just said yes at the lowest price to travel 200 miles to get a signing done, and then it's after hours, so that means I get the signing done, come back home. Well, FedEx or UPS, their office isn't open yet, so I've got to do scan backs, or not open yet, they're closed for the day. So I go home, I do scan backs, I'm waiting to get the green light to say that it's okay to mail, and then I've got to drive now again, leave my house again to get that to the FedEx or the UPS office. So these are all things that we have to keep in mind as a signing agent. And so if you start off asking the right questions to begin with, and you understand how much it costs you to do this work, you'll know exactly what to charge. And don't bat an eye. Don't let somebody browbeat you into accepting less. They'll always ask, can you accept yes? And less. They'll say, can you accept less? And I say, well, yes, I can. Are scan backs really required? Because that's, if they're not really required, well, then I can lower the price a little bit for you. But if I'm going to have to do scan backs, which means you got to take the documents back, scan them, right? And then you either upload them to their website or you upload them and then email it to them, and then you make sure.
That's using your internet services.
Well, internet service, but it's all about time. How much time is it going to take for you to scan 250 pages? Sometimes the loan packages are that big, and that's another question I ask. How big is a loan package? How many pages are we dealing with? And you'll learn that there are some companies that will send you, here's your loan document, and it's one single PDF. And I'm like, hallelujah, thank you, one PDF. And then there's another signing company, and they do this to me every time. It'll be 8 different PDFs. Well, you know what? That's 8 PDFs I've got to keep track of to make sure did I print all of them? Because it's easy to print one PDF and know, okay, well, either it all printed or it didn't. But if they're piecemealing stuff to you, and then when they piecemeal stuff, it's also, there's so much duplication. And then I find myself apologizing at the signing that, I'm sorry, I know this is the 3rd one that you've signed. I can't throw my signing company under the bus. I have to say, I'm sorry that yes, you did sign one just like this, but for whatever reason they require another one. And I find myself doing that for this company over and over. And so so it's just something to consider, because your time is valuable. Every extra thing they ask you to do is time. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's the federal laws that pertain to us as a signing agent. I just wanted to highlight that because we had talked previously just of, touched my nose again. We talked about the Washington state law, but there are definitely federal laws that are going to apply to us. So let's take a look at tab number 2.
As we turn into this, as you were talking, you made me think of insurance companies trying to protect their bottom line. So if you get into an accident and file a claim, they're going to want to pay you the minimum, because it's like you said, their purpose is to save money.
Right.
And so if they can cut you a small check.
Because the signing companies, I mean, I God bless them, they're needed, they're necessary, because if you're a title company, do you really want to pick up the phone and call 20 different individual notaries to see if they're available? Or you want to just hire a company to just deal with it, right?
Right.
I totally get it, but you're right, it's the signing company, the less they pay us, the higher their profit margin, right? And I just tell them, yes, this is my rate. You have to get it okay? You have to get it approved? Okay. And they'll either call you back or you just won't hear from them. They'll say, okay, well, I'll let you know if I can get that approved. And then you may not hear from them. I just take that with a grain of salt. And usually it's the decision maker that I get the calls from, like the one yesterday that I told you that I had. She was in charge of vendor management. She was the person that all these schedulers, they're 9 to 5 folks, it's their job to call and get these scheduled. And they are only allowed to okay up to this bottom line, right? Anything beyond that, they've got to stop and get permission, right? And that means more time for them. And their job is they're trying to get these signed out as quickly as they can too. And they're scrambling, some of them. So the call that I got yesterday was from the decision maker herself and said, here's your rate. She's like, we're in a bind. I'm like, well, and I didn't just say, oh, you're in a bind. Here, let me, how possibly, you know, what's the highest price I can charge because you're in a bind? No, that's not how I do business. I always, for every signing, and I don't even consider the house. Like, oh, this is a nice house, so I'm going to charge X amount. It doesn't even come into the picture because you're asking them over the phone. How many signers? What type of signing is it? How many signers? Because if it's one signer, that's one set of signatures you're tracking. If it's two signers, that's two different signatures on a doc. That's more time. It's more effort. It's more room for risk, for liability, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why one signer, two signers. Because some people will say, well, what does it matter? Well, it matters very much to me because that's time. That's, you know, if there's two things, if there's two signers, that's twice the notarizations you're going to do as well too. So what type of signing? How many signers? What kind of document is it? How many pages? If they know, sometimes they don't know. And the location. Are there any scan backs? So those are the things I need to know before I can give you a quote. Because I don't just say, oh, you're stuck, you're in a bind. Here, let me jack up the price as high as it's going to be. I just make sure it matches, the price matches the amount of work that I'm expecting. Okay, so let's look at this Notary Public Code of Professional Responsibility is not my material. This is put out by the National Notary Association, who I went through the online notary training. I really like their online notary training, but the in-person, the handling of the actual documents was the missing piece, and I think that's the code for that's the reason for this whole workshop is hands-on. So this Notary Public Code of Professional Responsibility, this is part 2. So if you're starting out as a notary public, this is a really great document because it'll supplement the Washington State Handbook. So item 2, those first two, items 1, item 2, great for starting out as notary public. Items 3, items 4, really focus on notary signing agents. So let's turn the page over. And we're looking at the table of contents. And we're going to go to page number 3. Oh, sorry, no, we're going to go to page number 1. Go to page 1 for the guiding principles. And the guiding principles for me, it all comes down to common sense. This one and the next one too. Guiding principles. So I'm looking at page number 1. All those Roman numeral pages, there's quite a few of them. Okay, so guiding principle 1, the notary shall serve the public in an honest, fair, and impartial manner. That sounds reasonable, and it jives with Washington state law because we're not going to decline on, for prejudicial reasons or discriminatory reasons. Guiding principle 2, the notary shall act as an impartial witness and not profit or gain, nor attempt to profit or gain from a notarial act apart from the fee for the notarial act and any charge associated with the fee if applicable. So as a signing agent, we're looking at that any charge associated with the fee as applicable. So we're handling documents for them, we're receiving them, we're printing them, we're transporting them, right? That costs money as a signing agent, and that's why we charge them more. Excuse me. The notary, item 3, guiding principle number 3, the notary shall require the appearance of each principal and witness identifying the principal, if any. Washington's not a witness state, so we don't have to worry about that. Remember, these guiding principles are written for the whole United States. Some states require witnesses for these loan documents. Hallelujah that Washington is not one of them, because those are fewer signatures we're required to keep track of too. So item 3. If any, in order to screen for identity, willingness, and mental competence. So that's in line with Washington state law, so that we're going to follow this guideline too. Item 4, the notary public shall not execute a false or incomplete notarial certificate, nor perform a notarial act with respect to any document or transaction that the notary believes is false, deceptive, or fraudulent. Remember those red flags that Washington state law identified? So of course we're going to, if there's something that is telling us that what they're asking us to do is wrong or illegal or improper, we're going to stop and we're going to call our signing agent. We're not going to do anything improper. 5, the notary shall act with reasonable care and not provide unauthorized advice or services. That's jiving. And what this also means is if we come to a signing, and I have a side business, I do weddings, or if I have a side gig, maybe my husband has a lawn mowing company, I'm not going to try to upsell them or side sell them anything. I'm there for the signing and the signing only. I don't try to sell them other services. 6, the notary shall affix or attach the official seal to every notarial certificate and not allow the seal to be used by another. Well, that's a no-brainer. Washington prohibits it, right? We've got to keep track of our own stamp. We can't just say, here's a stack of loan documents, stamp them yourselves and sign them yourselves. And no, we're not going to do that. So then 7, the notary shall record every notarial act in a bound paper or secure electronic journal and safeguard it as an important public record. So on this one, I want you to circle the word or, and then write the word no. No on that, okay? Because in Washington state law, we are required to have a bound journal. So if you say you do electronic notary notarizations, and maybe you do have an electronic journal, for us in Washington state, it's not an either or choice. We must have a bound notary journal. We can supplement it with an electronic journal, but we must have a bound journal. So in this case, on item 7, or doesn't apply for us in the state of Washington, because it's not a choice. It's not either have a bound book or electronic. You must have a bound notary journal. You could, if you do also electronic notarizations, you could supplement it and have an electronic journal, but you must have the bound page journal. Okay, and then item 8, the notary shall protect the privacy of each individual and not examine, copy, divulge, or use personal or proprietary information disclosed during the execution of a notarial act unless required by law. So remember that question. Is it okay if I keep copies of the documents that I notarize? And that's why it's a no, because we have to respect their privacy. They have a right to privacy. Now it says do not examine. Obviously we have to look at the documents, but what we're looking at in the loan documents, we're looking at dates. We're making sure the owner's name is correct. And if it's John and Jane Signer that we're going to meet, and then somewhere it has Bucky Smith, some wrong name, that it's like these people that are putting these documents together are human and they make human errors. So we're just making sure that the dates are correct, the names are correct, the address is correct. So, but we're not going to divulge any of that. That means we're not going to, if we've got we're not going to keep a tracking list of all of the new people that have just bought a house and then sell it to somebody so that they can try to sell them other services. We're not going to do that. And then 9, the notary shall obey all laws and official guidelines that pertain to notarial acts and follow the recognized practice of standards where they are silent. And so this is where Washington state law, we're going to follow Washington state law, but then if something's not clear, we're going to fall back on the Washington Notary Commission. And if the commission doesn't have any kind of recommendation for that, like looking at the guidebook, if there's no recommendation, and if it's not specified, then what we can do is use their guidelines, those guidelines where the law is silent. The notary shall seek instruction on notarizations and keep current on all laws, official guidelines, and practice standards of the notarial office. So like I said, all these guidelines, it all comes down to, does it jive with our Washington state law? And for the most part they do, except for the one about the journals. And it's all common sense for me. Okay, so you had a chance to read this. You read through this before, right? the guiding principles? Okay, and so then you saw that they give you these, they call them illustrations, but I call them, I'm just going to turn the page over. They, for me, are like scenarios. So I'm looking at page number 4. I'm looking at page number 4. So they give you a scenario. A1A, it says refusal on reasonable grounds. And so it gives you the scenario, or the illustration. The notary shall refuse to perform a notarial act if the notary has knowledge or a reasonable belief that which can be articulated that the transaction or document is unlawful. So you can't say no based on a gut feeling. You have to be able to articulate the reason. Otherwise, you could be accused of declining for discriminatory reasons. And then it has the illustration. The notary is asked to notarize a person's signature on a document as proof of identity. The individual presents a state's driver's license. The notary notices that the photograph on the license is raised from the surface of the ID and appears to be to overlay the state seal and signature of the DMV official. So resolution. So what's the solution? The notary refuses to notarize the individual signature because there are strong evidence that the driver's license has been tampered with and bears a false photograph. Okay, so here's a scenario, there's a resolution. But what I like about this book here in this section is that if we turn the page now to, it starts on page 7. Starts on page 7 at the bottom. It has commentary. Just want to show it. So it's got a commentary section. And the commentary section tells us how they arrived at it. How they arrived at it. And so if I go now, I'm going to go to page number 8. If we go to page 8 at the bottom where it says A1A, refusal on reasonable grounds. So it gives you, there's notary signing agents that they want to know, here's a scenario, what should I do? Okay, done, great. And then there's the signing agent that says, here's a scenario, what should I do? Why should I do it that way? And the commentaries in this section of the training materials is helpful because it tells you how they arrived at that, and it's got a bunch of, you can see it's got a bunch of statutes listed there, and so it kind of explains from the legal aspect why they arrived at that. So that's what I wanted to call out is if they've got these guiding principles, they have scenarios in this book for each principle, and then in the commentary section explains how they arrived at it. And some people don't care, but then there's the people that are like, they're the why. I'm one of those why people. I want to know why, because I want to be able to apply that reasoning later on. Okay, great. So we're not going to go through each scenario for each of the guiding principles. Let's do this. Let's go to tab number 3. Tab number 3 is this. It's the signing agent, notary signing agent code of conduct. And this is where he starts getting into the meat of what a notary signing agent do's and don'ts. This is put out by the signing professionals work group, and this is their best practices. This is what they determine are best practices for a signing agent. Okay, so I'm just going to scoot this over to look at the table of contents. And just like with Washington state law, when you're looking at the RCWs, at the beginning of every RCW, it has definitions, right? It has definitions. What do they mean by closing? Here they're talking definitions. Closing relative. What is meant by closing relative? What is a closing? What is a closing agent? What are closing documents? And so, if you know the vocabulary of the profession, you know the profession. And so if there's any word here that you're like unclear, well, what is a closing agent? Well, and keep in mind, we are not the closing agent. We are at a closing, we are a signing agent. The closing agent is the one that we're forwarding this, after we do execute all these documents, the closing team is getting this stuff. And so if you know the vocabulary of the profession, I say you know the profession. So if there's anything in here that jumps out as like, well, I'm not sure of, or I've never heard that term before, those are the ones you want to key into. And let's go now, what we want to look at in section 3 is the guiding principles, and that's on page 5. So we're going to go to page 5, guiding principles. Okay, so we're at page 5, page 5. Number 1, qualifications, right? The notary signing agent will satisfactorily meet and maintain all qualifications necessary to performing the signing services. Of course, and that drives with state of Washington requirement too. Well, we have no requirement for signing agent, but we do for signing, for notary public, right? However, there are business laws that we have to follow too. So we have to know the rules of our profession. If we're going to conduct ourselves as a notary signing agent, we should have an understanding of what our job is, the laws that pertain to us, and loan documents, a general understanding of loan documents. And so maintain, so the only thing we have to maintain here in this one is our bond, right? Because right now that's the only requirement. Remember, a bond protects the signer, or excuse me, protects the customer. Insurance protects us. So hopefully you've got your bond and also insurance.
I do. My question is, what I have, it covers me as a notary? Is there something additional or separate?
Yes, it's different. It's very different.
As a signing agent?
Yep, and what you want to do is call whoever you have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, does notary public insurance cover you for a notary signing agent? And I would caution you, I would say no, because I had to go through that myself. Okay. What you want to do is call whoever you got your insurance from, mm-hmm. and explain to them, hey, I am now going to be working as a signing agent, and because your hiring companies are going to require this. They want to see, good for you that you have a commission and you've got a notary bond. What is your E&O? They want to know, they want to know you've got errors and omissions insurance as a signing agent. And so and your insurance company is going to say, for this amount, here's the price, for this amount, here's the price. And our notary public insurance and bond is for the term. It's for 4 years, right? It's for the term of our commission. As a signing agent, when we get insurance or a bond, it's annual. It's per year. So it is different. It's very different.
Okay.
So,
Because I do have my bond, and I have my E&O insurance, but it's
as a notary public.
a notary, yes.
Right.
I don't have anything additional as a signing agent.
Right,
So
and
that's
what you want to
something
do is look at your insurance policy, because I remember when I signed up, that's one of the questions when they're determining how much to charge us for our notary bond. They ask questions like, well, are you dealing in real estate?
See, and at that particular time, I was.
Right, and so the answer was no at that time, right? The answer was no. And so you need to make sure your insurance company understands what you're doing now and make sure you're covered. Because like I said, the bond is for the customer, insurance is for us. And there are and I've got some documents here. There are very real scenarios where people think that they're covered. And I know this is kind of a sideline right now, but this is a good transition. So this came, I'm just going to put this here. This came from the National Notary Association. I got it in the mail the other day. Career-ending mistakes. So that one was like, well, you got my attention. Let's take a look at that. So I tabbed it. So So in the article, it talks about so this notary went into. They got a request for a signing, and it was just. I think this is just basic notary public, but so they got a request, and they ended up meeting in the parking lot with some folks that were asking them to sign some deeds, and. Anyways, it ended up being a scam. It was a scam to steal people's houses. But the notary is in trouble, You know, so the purpose of this, don't give into pressure, it says. So it ended up being a scam. So those people who were scamming got in trouble, but you know what? They circled back and got that notary too. And that notary was indicted. Yep, because they didn't follow the rules. They didn't follow the rules, and they ended up being indicted. And at printing, it said, when I read the article, it says that they're in court. They're still in court. It's going to go probably to trial. But the notary's been indicted over this. And so they had, let's see, she got indicted. I can't remember I'm trying to think what the resolution was, or if it had come to a resolution. But without insurance, without errors and omissions insurance, you are personally liable for this money. So I think the insurance company ended up negotiating. Oh, it was a title company, that's right. It was a title company who sued the notary and said, hey, if you had done your job and checked ID, this wouldn't have happened. They sued the notary. The notary's insurance, she had errors and omissions insurance, thankfully. She ended up it was ended up $50,000 is what she had to pay, right? So that was just with her E&O, right? So that's that errors and omissions insurance. Otherwise, that would have been out of her pocket. And then the criminal aspect came around, and then the authorities indicted her, and now she's on criminal charges. So that was a civil suit. That was a civil suit that she had to settle with her errors and omissions insurance. And now criminally, she's answering an indictment, and that's in process right now too. So we're going to do everything we can to act within the guidelines and to follow the rules. If there are red flags that jump out, like, hey, now suddenly you're meeting in a dark parking lot and the people aren't in front of you. That's why physical presence is so important. That's why checking ID is so important. It's because you're not just doing it to inconvenience them. I mean, that puts you on the hook too, as a notary signing agent or as a notary public. That puts you at, that's extreme liability for you. So the qualifications for us in this case is our bond. We're going to maintain our bond. And then my caution is just that, no, the bond is for your customer. Hopefully everybody gets errors and omissions insurance for them.
So do I need an additional bond as well?
Ask your insurance company.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I pulled mine out, and this is my E&O, and this is for $10,000.
Right, and then so that's for the customer, right? That's not insurance, and so you want to just pick up the phone, call your insurance folks, and I don't have any recommendation as far as insurance companies, but it's nice to have one that's going to be on the same time zone as you. Errors. I mean, that's just handy. Otherwise, you're keeping in mind that if you call them, they're on East Coast time, and you just got to bear that in mind. Okay, let's skip down. We're looking at number 2, the notarization. Notary signing agent will follow all laws, rules, and best practices that apply to the notarizing of closing documents. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Impartiality. You okay? Mm-hmm. Notary signing agent will remain impartial to the transaction at all times. That makes sense to me too, because we're not there to encourage the signer to sign. We're not there to discourage the signer to sign. And they'll ask us, they'll say, is this a good deal? Would you sign it? Are these, and you can't. You're not there. You are the objective third party. And I always tell them, you want me to be objective. You don't want me. And also, other than I'm prohibited from giving you that kind of advice. You don't want that. I'm here to be objective for you, for the lender, for the title company. Everybody wants that objective third party. Unauthorized advice or services, another one that is, I have highlighted this one. The notary signing agent will not provide legal, personal, financial, or other advice or services to the signer in connection with the signing assignment, nor explain the terms of any closing document presented to the signer. And so there's a lot to unpack in this one. So we're not going to provide legal or personal advice. So when you're at a sign-in, I don't know if this will happen for you, but when you're at a signing, it's like the signing is going on, but then also there's also this side conversation that is also going on. I learned so much about this lady that I did a signing with yesterday. And Yeah, so just make it a point. Just remember they're there for business, but it can, especially when they're so happy to see you, people get friendly and sometimes they genuinely like you. You know, you meet them and you really like them and they really like you, and I don't know, there's a rapport that's built and a trust that's built, and sometimes they'll seek your opinion or your advice on something, and it can even it can be related to the signing, or it could be something totally unrelated to the signing. And so you have to bear in mind this thing that says, I'm not supposed to provide any kind of advice. You're just, you're just listening, and you have to defer. You have to politely defer, and you'll develop your own thing to say. I mean, you don't want to be rude to them or off-put them, but yeah, it's kind of a weird thing that happens when you meet somebody. It's like you've just met them, and this lady that I left her house. By the time I left her house, it was so unnatural. I mean, because of COVID-17 or COVID-19 rather, we can't shake hands, so it was unnatural that because we wanted to shake hands. And then at the closing, I swear this woman wanted to hug me, and I had to just like briskly walk quickly ahead because she liked me so much. People are like that. Yeah, but we don't want to do that. We don't. For now, we don't want to do that for safety reasons, but also for personal reasons. We can't be accused of having done anything, if they say, okay, Carmen, what happened at the signing? This lady said you took advantage of her. Well, yeah, I did hug her. Well, why did you hug her? Was it because she hugged me? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. So you got to keep business, keep all that separate. And you don't want to, I think I said before, you're there to conduct the signing. You're not there to offer, especially if she needs mowing. You're not there to offer your husband's landscaping services either. It's business is business. You're going to stick to the signing agent business only. 5, illegal or suspicious activity. Those red flags that jump up at us, we need to pay attention to, and we're not going to perform any illegal, deceptive, or harmful act in connection with a signing assignment, and we're going to report any suspicious activity to whoever hired us. And write this down too, under 5. Note it in your journal. You want whatever's happened that's obscure or just bizarre that's happened, make a note of it in your journal, because maybe that may not come into play, but maybe for a few months down the road, those red flags in your mind or some whatever weirdness, if the authorities circle back to you and say, hey Carmen, do you remember this signing on such and such a date? Well, I'll have my journal to look back at, and I'll say, well, yeah, I remember that, and here's the odd thing that happened. Obviously, if it was weird enough that I didn't feel safe or comfortable going through with a signing, my note will say that I stopped it, right? But you want to note it in your journal, especially if you ever have to decline anybody. You've started it with the signing process, you've captured all their information. Then towards the end, if it doesn't go through, you're making a note of why it didn't go through, so that, and this is whether it's a notary signing or a notary public, so that they can't circle back and say, hey, I went to Ayana for a notary, and she declined me. She was discriminatory. Well, if you don't have any record of it in your journal, that may be problematic for you if you don't remember them. But if you just have that journal that said, yeah, here's the reason why I declined. Here's the reason I lawfully declined this. It's just a protection thing. 6, privacy and confidentiality. The notary signing agent will respect the privacy of each signer and protect closing documents from unauthorized disclosure. So that's what I said about that. This thing here. This is going to keep it safe from the elements. It also keeps it safe from prying eyes. You don't want to leave loan documents sitting out at your house or in a public place. Now, I did do a signing once at a Taco Bell. And if there's people coming and going in that Taco Bell, that was at their request. I didn't suggest meeting there. The signers suggested it. But that's beyond my control. But I did note it in my journal. We met at a Taco Bell to get this done. It's a public place. There were people walking around. So, but you want to do everything you can to protect their information. Fees, the notary signing agent will follow all contractual obligations in charging and collecting fees for services, especially for collecting. So when you're hired, you're going to get paid by whoever hired you, not by the people you're sitting down with, not the signers. So you will never collect money for them. They will offer sometimes, they're like, do I pay you? What, And apparently there are some notaries or signing agents out there that are unethical, and they'll collect what's due from the hiring company, and they'll collect something from the signers too, and that's illegal. You can't do that. whatever agreement you have with the signing company is a contract, so you can't come back on them and then charge more. On the other hand, they can't come back on you and charge less. But we'll come to that, because it comes down to being a contract that you have with them, an agreement. But we're not going to collect it from the borrowers, from the signers, unless they're the ones that hired you, right? Then obviously we're going to collect money from them. If the person that you're sitting down with is the one who hired you, then obviously you would collect money from them. Advertising, obviously we're not going to engage in any unethical, unprofessional, false or misleading or deceptive advertising. We're not going to do that in person, verbally or online or written. We're not going to do any of that false advertising. Professionalism, we're going to act in a professional, responsible manner towards contracting companies and parties to the transaction. So I made a note to myself here, do not badmouth, and also do not throw anybody under the bus. So when you're sitting down with their signers, they don't need to know what an obstacle it was to extract those documents that you've been waiting for all day. The loan documents have finally arrived from your hiring company. Your signers don't need to know what a headache that was. You don't, because that gives them, that paints a picture of of the lender to the signers, and you don't want to throw any of them under the bus. And you also don't want to throw those signers under the bus to the lenders or to your hiring company. You don't want to say, oh, John and Jane signers, they were complete. Now, if they were angry and hostile, I'll make a note, but I'm being objective and I'll say, Mr. Signer was hostile, visibly upset and expressed frustration because documents had arrived late or the amount was different from what he was expecting, but he still proceed, and you offer them, do you wish to stop the signing? Do we need to call your loan officer? If they could just be grumbling, they're just voicing a grumbling. But I'll note that in my notes. They'll say, Mr. Signer was frustrated, so that if it comes, and I'll let the hiring company know that. It's in my notary journal, and I'll let the hiring company know that in case Mr. Signer goes back and says that Carmen Lane was, if he has something negative to say about me, well, they have in their notes that Mr. Signer was a bit hostile to Carmen because of the paperwork. Well, the hiring company knows that the paperwork is not my fault. When that paperwork arrives to me and what it says and what it contains is not my fault. So, but just make a note. You don't want to ignore it, because they want a heads up too. If they're angry, they want a heads up that their signers were angry. Standards. The notary signing agent will endeavor to maintain and raise standards of practice amongst practitioners in the signing service company. So look at us, we're having a workshop here. I say kudos for us. We are raising the standards by getting together like this, and we're discussing it. And but basically, even these 10 guidelines, it all comes down to common sense. And I didn't see anything in here that really jumped out at me to say that, no, that we're not going to follow that or that doesn't apply. Just some added things like if there's some illegal or suspicious activity, anything like that, we're going to note it in our journal. We're going to report it, and we're going to note it in our journal. And then as far as professionalism, of course we're going to be professional to every group, because we don't know who knows who, right? And I've had it where the signers are actually personally good friends with their loan officer. So I never want to you don't know who knows who in the business, and so you just want to stay professional. Questions about any of these? Okay. Okay, so then that brings us to section 4. Section 4 is the signing presentation guidelines. Okay, let's go right here. Signing presentation guidelines. And so this is developed by the Signing Professionals Work Group. And so that contains their recommended descriptions. And you're going to find that I think there's 27 terms that are defined here. Well, there are more than 27 types of loan documents, I can assure you. And inevitably, you will come across a document that is not included or is maybe worded differently from what these descriptions are. But our job is to kind of we have to think on our feet as a signing agent. And so, we've got a stack of documents. We're going to the loan signing. What can we say about those loan documents? What should we say? What are we permitted to say? Well, we're not allowed to talk about details, like the details of, Some people have, in fact, this lady Brandy, she called me a while back. She's over in North Carolina, and Brandy was starting her own. She wanted some advice. She would have loved to come to this workshop, she said, but timing didn't work out. And of course, who knew then? Even if she had booked it, she probably would have had to cancel because of COVID-19. But Brandy said she was working on a work group like this, a workshop, and she wanted some advice. And what can you say about these loan documents? And so you have to follow their recommendations. This is their guidelines. We don't have to follow it. It's their guidelines. It's to our benefit to follow this, because we've got a stack of documents. What can we say about it? And this Brandy, she was like, well, I'm a former loan officer. I was a loan officer, so I know how to explain these things. And I said, well, Brandy, that's really great, except guess what? Your role has changed. You are not permitted to. Look at the rules for North Carolina, but I'm pretty sure you're not permitted to do it. She's like, oh, you are right. I shouldn't do that. I'm like, nope, you have to stay in your lane. Yes, and back then you wore a different hat and you were a loan officer. Well, now you are a signing agent, and they don't want us discussing these loan terms. The lenders, they don't want us discussing the terms because we're not qualified. In their eyes, we're not qualified to do it. So as a rule, we're not going to do it. So the nice thing about this, how they have this laid out, is it's like a script that they've created, and they've even got as far as hello, my name is. And I'll tell you what, I had one of these scripts when I went to my first signing, because you don't know, it's exciting, it's terrifying, you get butterflies. They couldn't see it, but I had a script where I could look down and say, hello, my name is Carmen. I'm not joking. I had it. Hello, my name is Carmen, and I'm here on behalf of, and we've got our mock title company. I think I used Alpha Title. I'm here on behalf of Alpha Title and Escrow and Beta Financial. I'm here on behalf of Alpha Title and Escrow and Beta Financial to conduct your loan signing. I had the script all written out, because there's one thing to be all excited and say, okay, no, I got it. But then it's like stage fright. If you've ever been at a play and you practice, and then it comes time and it's showtime, and then you're just like, blank. And so having this verbatim script, I tell you, it helped me the first few times, because even though I may not have used it, I was there and I could glance down and that gave me confidence. It's like having a cheat sheet when you take a test. I had an instructor that say, write a cheat sheet. I'm not going to let you use it, but write a cheat sheet anyways. What would you have on that cheat sheet? And knowing that you have that in your mind, that you've written this out, hello, my name is Carmen. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So it's embarrassing that I have to say that, but believe it or not, public speaking does not come naturally or easy for me. It is something I strive for to do, and I struggle with. Same with shaking hands, video, being on video, having my picture taken. Those are all outside of my comfort zone. And so by having a script for me, anyways, it gave me the confidence to know that, hey, you know what? If it came down to it and I actually forgot my name, all I have to do is look down and there's my name. It's right there. So,
this will be okay, because even me calling you, that was a phone call.
Yeah.
And so I was.
And some people have that gift.
So excited with the NNA. So I went to the signingagent.com website that the NNA puts you on.
Right.
And so I found local agents around here, and I did just looking for that mentorship. Yep. I started calling people. See, and
that takes courage to do that. And there are people out there that are like, that's terrifying, I'm not going to do it. That's cold calling, that's terrifying, I'm not going to do it. So anyway, they've got different sections here. So section 1, the pre-signing confirmation. That's about, when you're calling to confirm the appointment. Section 2, introduction. You're introducing yourself on behalf of the title company. Because remember, you're the face. You are now the face of the lender. You're the face of that title company. I'm here on behalf of them. You make sure they understand you're not hired by them. Here on behalf of them, it's nice to meet you. And then section 3, instructions. And so, they even go so far as make sure you show them ID and then wait for them to invite you inside. So this, the instructions part. And for guys, I think it's important, especially for guys, to know this, because if you're a gentleman signing agent, you want to wait for the signer to invite you in. And I do it even when my signers are men, go in there and I'm standing outside, I show them my ID to show them I am me, and wait for them to invite me in. And it's just a courtesy, so they don't feel like, hey, Carmen, this signing agent person came here and she just barged into my home, And I always ask, do you need me to take my shoes off? Because I'll look at their door, at their porch, and sometimes they've got their shoes on, or sometimes their shoes are off. But I just say, do you need me to take my shoes off? And I try to wear something easy to slip on and off. So but I just do it because my rules are shoes off in the house. Please, shoes off. We don't always force people to adhere to it because some people if they're older, it's a struggle for them to get their shoes off and on. But anyway, so I just try to wait to be invited in. Do I need to take my shoes off? And then our job is to give them an overview of the process. And here it says 45 to 60 minutes. Well, that's generous. 45 to 60 minutes. That's conservative. That's not generous. That's very conservative. The signing I did yesterday took 2 hours. It was only 100 pages. It took 2 hours. You'd never know what condition these people are in, or where they're at, and if they take longer to sign. Some people, every signature is an effort, and they're doing their best they can, and you just have to be patient. Sometimes it's going to be a quick signing. Sometimes it's going to be a 2 hour. Sometimes, oh my gosh, sometimes it's going to be a 3 hour. Yeah, and because it depends on how slowly they're signing. Some people suddenly become readers. They've received all this documentation prior to you arriving, but they're just now deciding to read it. Well, that's great. Well, you have no power over that. And it's their right to read it. So you let them do what they need to do.
So if they have received this already?
They haven't received all the signing materials. What they've received is like the terms of the loan, to understand the terms of the loan.
Got it. Okay. Because my question was going to be, if they've received it already, what is the purpose of us taking another copy for them to have if this is something that they've received already? But now I understand.
Yeah, and sometimes they've received a loan estimate, and so this is the best guess of what the rates and everything is going to be. And then they get the closing disclosure, which is, it may be different, and if it's different, it'll show why is it different. And yeah, so but that closing disclosure, even they're supposed to have received it 3 days prior. 3 days prior, they're supposed to have received it. But my point is, however long it takes them to get through that signing, you have to allow them. You can't last thing you want to do is make them feel rushed or pressured, because you know what? They can turn that around and say, signing agent made me feel pressured and told me I had to do this and told me I had to do, you don't want that. You are the objective third party. You're not there to push them to sign. You're not there to encourage them not to sign. You certainly don't want to say, hey, well, you've got 3 days to change your mind. Just go ahead and sign it, and if you change you definitely don't want to be that person saying that either. Don't ever even, I had a signing company suggest that to me and suggest it to a buyer. We were at the signing table and the borrower had questions. So we got them on the line, and God bless them, they answered the phone. And we're all on speakerphone, and the person on the phone is saying, well, there's a 3-day period. You could just sign it. You could just move forward with the signing today, and if you change your mind, you've got 3 days to change your mind. That is not cool to say. I didn't say that in front of them because that falls under the line of don't throw anybody under the bus. You want to stay professional. So then the questions were answered to their satisfaction off the phone, hung up the phone with that person. And I'm like, do you want to proceed? And ask them, do you feel comfortable proceeding? Because that's a valid question. Do you feel comfortable proceeding? And if they answer yes, you go forward. If it ever comes back to you, you could say, well, we stopped the signing. We called the loan officer. Loan officer answers questions, hung up. I asked the borrower, are they comfortable proceeding? Do they wish to proceed? They said yes. Oh, you're off the hook, because you're not reiterating what that wrong person just said, that, hey, just sign it anyways and then change your mind. So we're gonna explain what's going to happen to them. We're going to tell them it's going to take, this says 45 to 60 minutes. I'm just saying that it may or may not take that long. It depends on what the document is, depends on how long they take to read the documents, and how long. I'm not kidding, sometimes the signature is like this, each time. Some people are like this, it's a scribble, it's like a doctor, and it's a scribble and they're done. So you tell them, I've got a copy of the entire loan package for your records, and you hand them, you can hand them a stack, and I normally do, I'm like, we've got 2 stacks here, one set we're gonna execute, and the other stack is for your records, and they're exact duplicates. And I even go so far as to print the label for them because it's got a tracking number, and I'll highlight that and say, in case you want to know where this is going afterwards, here's the tracking number, you can track it. And so that's the nice thing about this. And then it even has a closing ceremony, or sorry, it talks about the closing ceremony. The closing ceremony is the signing, and it's just they call it a closing ceremony, but we just call it the signing appointment. So it even says to, let's see, looking at section 5, the closing ceremony. As you walk through the documents with the borrower, please find the definitions of the loan document, of the loan closing documents. It is suggested, so it's not required, it is suggested to use these descriptions as a guide as you walk the borrower through the loan closing documents. It is suggested as you go to the page to be signed that you give the borrower a brief description of the document below. Please note that they will come in various stacking orders, so it's recommended that you be familiar with these definitions. These definitions are, of course, they're listed in alphabetical order. We are never going to receive a loan package that is so, I mean, if I do, I'm going to be sure and note that in my diary, but it is never going to come to us in alphabetical order. But it's alphabetical order for us, just for learning purposes. And so, and if you put a star next to closing disclosure. So these are like 27 terms, right? So put a star next to closing disclosure. And I see you've got a highlighter there, so that's great. That's a big long blurb to say about the closing disclosure. And so put a star next to closing disclosure, and I want you to highlight this sentence that says, closing disclosures itemize all closing costs. Right? And then it goes, you don't have to say page 1 includes this and this and this. You're going to see that on the document itself. It itemizes all closing costs. And the closing disclosure is a nice big font. It's one of my favorite documents because 99% of the questions that they ask can be answered by looking at the documents in here. And then you see at the bottom, please note the borrower should have received this document from his or her lender in advance of the closing. So now suddenly they're just like, oh, let me pay attention to this now. And there's some people are like that. Some people are just sign, go, next, and they're not reading it because they've already read the closing disclosure. Some people suddenly, because you're there in person, it's now suddenly real to them, and now they feel fearful or anxious, and that makes them want to look closer at everything. But if you're saying what the document is and what it's for, that kind of conveys to your signer, it gives them a little bit of confidence that you know what you're doing. They're not going to just be signing things blindly. It gives them some confidence.
So then that would be the description. This is your closing cost, the closing disclosure, and this itemizes all the closing costs.
Right.
That sentence is sufficient?
You can say less, but you certainly can't say more, right? Because they don't want you to go into, what they don't want you to do is, and when we come to the closing disclosure, they don't want you to say, here is your loan for $675. Here's your, they don't want you, it's a lot of pointing. It's a lot of, here's your closing disclosure, here's your loan amount, here's your interest rate, these are the conditions, the next few pages, and then sometimes it's got like written out, all the costs are just, they're itemized. It's itemized closing costs, so they know exactly what the closing costs are for. Because sometimes they'll say, holy cow, $16,000 in closing costs? What is it for? When they used to just be bound up like that. Well, now lenders, they're all required to break it out. So they tell the borrower, well, where's this money going? What is this for? So, okay, so we've got a star next to closing disclosure. Put a star next to the mortgage. Let's see, I think I may have, okay, so I forgot to switch this over.
Deed and trust.
Yeah,
Is that what you're getting ready to say?
yep, I just make sure we're on the same page there. Okay. So we've got star next to closing disclosure. And I've just was talking about the closing ceremony here. I'm just going to underline this one here. Underlines. Okay, closing disclosure. We're turning the page. And let's see. Yes, mortgage deed of trust, put a star next to that one. Oops, I'm off kilter. Sorry about that. So mortgage deed of trust, put a star next to the note. Put a star next to right to cancel. These are things when we come to them in the closing package, I like to put a tab up on the top, not just to where they're going to sign, but up top, so I can go right to that document. I'm not digging through 250 pages worth of loan documents. Especially if they say, well, wait, before we go any further, how much am I paying per month? Well, great, then let me just go to the first payment letter or the closing disclosure, which I'll already have pre-tabbed, and we can answer that question right off the bat. So put a star next to that, and then the next one is okay, we're going to put a star next to payment letter because we're going to put a tab on that. First, and this one is called payment letter. Very often it's called first payment letter, but they're calling it payment letter. So those are the ones that I want to star next to, only because we're gonna make sure we highlight those when we look at the loan documents. Okay, so let's look at the last page, page 5. Page 5, and talks about ending the transaction. So you're gonna, after you sign all the documents, you're gonna go through and do a quality control check to make sure you didn't miss any signatures. And you can tell them, hey, that's the end of the documents. I need to sit here for a minute and just do quality control, make sure we didn't miss any signatures or notarizations. And you're gonna do that on your own. They tell them they can carry about their business. If you need them, you'll call them back. And then you tell them, you make sure that they have a printed copy of their closing package. If they ask for electronic copy, you're going to refer them to the lender, because we do not have any kind of email correspondence with the borrower. We have no email relationship with the borrower or with the signer. And we certainly don't want to email any documents because we could be wrong, right? And that's a risk. And so we're just not, we're never going to do it. What we can say is, I'll forward that request so that your loan officer knows that. And that's what you're going to tell the closing company, your hiring company rather, at the end when you're doing your post-signing work. You're going to let them know, hey, Mr. Signer would like to have an electronic copy of that. And then, so funds to close. If the borrower does not have funds to close per the closing instructions, contact the hiring company. And hopefully you'll find out before that. You're going to find out at the very beginning, like when you get the assignment, you're going to understand when you get the documents, is there cash to close? And that means sometimes a borrower, to get their loan to close, they'll have to bring money to the table. And if it's a certain amount, it could be a personal check. If it's another amount, it's got to be a cashier's check. And if it's even a greater amount, it's got to be wired. But they have to come prepared. If those are required, as part of your instructions, like you must collect a cashier's check for X amount, you better make sure that you remind, when you're calling to confirm that with your signers, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Signer, we're on for Saturday the 21st. We're going to do a loan signing, and I understand, do you have two forms of ID for me? Yes, we have that. Okay, and do you understand that you have to bring cash to close? It's a cashier's check for $945. They'll say, yes, we're aware of it, we've got it, we're good. Or they'll say, what? I don't think my lender didn't mention any of that. Well, it's better to get that out and about, known ahead of time, so that you're not the bearer of bad news at that signing table, because they will not appreciate it. Everybody wants to be prepared for that signing. That loan, the signers have waited all this time. Remember, it could be stage 50 for them, step 50, you're there at their door, and now suddenly there's they're hearing in their mind for the first time that a check for $945 is required to close.
So at that point, after verifying that they either do or don't know, whose responsibility does that now
Okay,
become? So like, do I need to call back my hiring company to tell them they didn't know anything about this? And
So
you guys need to give them a call. and
okay,
make
so
sure they know?
that's a good question. So what happens if they didn't know about the check? So it depends on at what process are we talking about it. They're saying they didn't know when you called to confirm, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Signer, calling to confirm our sign-in appointment Saturday the 21st, and you're making sure they've got ID, and if they say, what, $945 in a cashier's check, this is the first I'm hearing of it. So you say, okay, well, you're going to want to definitely get in contact with your loan officer. I'm going to make a note of that to my hiring company and make sure they understand, right? Because if that's a requirement, it's like you've gone through all these steps and you signed all this paperwork. Okay, so if you've gone through all the steps, they said, yes, we have the cash to close, but then come to the end of the signing, now they're like, where's the cash to close? Oh, we don't have it. Yeah, now you got to pick up the phone. You got to call, you're going to call whatever number that they instruct you to call, because you did your job by warning them that they were supposed to bring it. So yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good question, because if they don't have the check and they haven't resolved it after you confirm the appointment with them, you're notifying your hiring company to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith know nothing about this $945 cashier's check. And they'll be, if it's a signing company and not the lender themselves who's hired you, they'll say, hold on a second, let me get a hold of the lender. And then the lender will say, yes, Mr. Smith, Mr. Signer knows about this. We discussed this. Let me call. So then they'll call. Yeah, there's a dance that has to happen, and either the signing will go forward because Mr. and Mrs. Signer will make a different arrangement with the loan officer, like maybe they're going to wire it instead, or it'll be canceled or rescheduled. And those are out of your hand. But I mean, it's out of your hand regardless, because you just have to do your part in making sure that they know that it's there, that it's required. If you're at the signing table and you've signed all these documents, and actually that's one of the things I would bring up in the front and say, okay, we got the IDs, and do you have your cash to close? Great. Hold that aside for now. Because in my mind, because you learn the hard way. You learn the hard way. You don't want to go through all this, the 2 hours of signing documents, and now suddenly they want to spring upon you that, yeah, we decided not to do that. So that's something to know ahead of time.
So would that be a reason to refuse then? Is they didn't have all of the? Well,
you're not refusing. You're not refusing. If they don't leave their house. You want to still come in but you want to let them know, and you want to collect, their ID and all this stuff. You want to call the hiring company and you say, hi, I'm Carmen Lane. I'm here with the John and Jane Signer, and here's the loan number. And they don't. We're preparing to do the signing, and they actually don't have cash to close. They did not have the cashier's check. How do you want us to proceed? And they'll give you instructions. They'll either say, oh, cancel it, we got to redo it, or they'll say, let's get Mr. Signer on the phone. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Signer, we really need to have this in lieu of a cashier's check. Maybe they're going to say, we're going to need you to fill out the portion that has wiring instructions, because we're going to need you to wire it to us. But you are never saying, I'm out of here. You were calling your signing company because you don't want to be the one that does that. Any instruction to stop the signing, now unless it's something illegal, you're saying, oh, this is John and Jane Smith, but these are not them, and they've got forged ID or whatever, then you're gonna stop the signing, but you're still gonna be on the phone calling to tell them why you're stopping the signing. Okay, it's never your idea to leave unless something's like, oh, well, you know what? This is a good example. COVID-19. You get all your ducks in a row, right? And you go to the signing, and they've told you over the phone that they're happy, healthy, and well, and they're obviously not. That, or just something else comes up, and if you're concerned for your safety, their dog bites you or whatever. I mean, No, I mean, especially with COVID-19 is a good example, because we're having to go through now where the signers are required to say, hey, I'm not happy, I'm healthy, and I've not traveled to China, you know, I've not done the traveling, I don't know, you know, I'm not, haven't been exposed to anybody with COVID-19, I'm not exhibiting symptoms. So they're having to fill that out, because there's a shortage right now of notaries going out to signings. Of course, there's a reduced number of signings right now too, because people are just afraid. Mm-hmm. They're like, you know, I had somebody, ducks were all lined up, ducks in a row. And then he called me and says, you know, I've just decided to change my mind because I don't know what's going to happen. It was a signing that was going to happen in DuPont. He's like, I just feel this can wait. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I will, so that he canceled with me. So then I'm emailing and on the phone to my hiring company to say, Mr. Smith doesn't wish to do the signing tomorrow or today, you know, whatever time it was. And here's why, he's uncertain. And so that gets, because I don't have the power to delete something off my assigned book, right? If you have a login to their website with a signing company, you can't make a thing disappear. You have to tell them, and then they take it off your to-do list, right? But so the bottom line is you're on the phone, you're contacting, you're in a communication with the signing, with the hiring company, title company, whoever hired you. You're on the phone with them to let them know whatever is happening.
Okay, so in a situation like that, how do you collect your pay? Because you still did the work.
Okay.
And that's not your fault that didn't happen.
No,
especially
and that is very
$50.
true. But you remember, you're not collecting from that signer. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Signer. Okay, I'm sorry it didn't work out. You're going to remain professional. You're not going to shake hands. I reached my hand out to pretend I'm shaking hands because it's such a habit. You're going to thank them, whatever, hand across the heart, you know, and bid them adieu, and you leave. And then you're in a communication with your signing company. Now, hopefully, you and your signing company have already had contingency plans for that, because before they hire you, typically they have to send you a contract that says, these are, you know, and it's like, you got to read through it. It says, I promise I'm going to dress professionally, you know, I'm going to, you know, they've got a code of conduct too. And sometimes in the actual assignment, we'll have what the agreement is. Like, okay, if they canceled before you left, you're going to get paid. Or if they canceled and you've already printed, there's a printing fee you can request. Or
So
if you've,
is that something that you can set?
you can, you have the power, because if they send it to you, now, if they send you the assignment and then the instructions, and in those instructions has the contingency, like if the signing doesn't take place but you've already printed the documents, we'll pay you this much. If the signing, if you traveled there and they canceled, then okay, you've got the printing fee and the travel fee. Okay. I actually went through, I got paid for the whole signing because, trying to think of the reason that the lady signed. Oh, you know what it was? The paperwork was all good, but the first payment date, that's this lady, she saved me so much time, because she's like, okay, before we do anything, I need to know when the first payment is due, because my lender, you know, my loan officer told me it was going to be on this date, and I've already paid this. So we looked at it, sure enough, they had the wrong date on there. Called the lender, called the number we're supposed to call, and they got on the phone and they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. We'll need to reissue these documents. I'm so sorry. But it was their fault. So if it's an error on their side, paperwork or whatever, I got paid full price. I had to go back out there. I got paid again to actually do it, but I got paid my full rate to go out there. I mean, it was an hour and a half drive to this lady's house. They hired me as it's like, oh, we really need this done. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll drop everything. Let me do this for you. I did it. I did everything right. They made the mistake. So I got paid for it, and then I got paid again when I actually went out and did it.
But recreate the whole process of the replan.
Right, but it comes down to what you agree to ahead of time. Okay. And sometimes you'll, and I was dealing directly with the title company. It wasn't a service. Now, if it's a service, oh my gosh, if it's a signing service, they want to pay you the minimum. They want to pay you maybe your printing costs. That you traveled in an hour and a half, They may or may not care. It just depends on what you've agreed to. And so when you get that assignment and it has those per things, if you're like, wait a minute, if it cancels, I'm only going to get this, or if this happens, I only get that. Or they'll say, if any pages are cut off, they'll do the other way around too. If this isn't done, if you've missed a notarization, that's this deduction, or it's an automatic 50% reduction. If they'll put their rules in instructions, and if any of that is not okay with you, that's the time to turn around and decline it before you're showing up or printing documents, or showing up at the signer's door. You want to make sure you agree with it, and if you don't, then you're contacting them to say, hey, this says this, but I want to change it. And they may or may not change it, or they'll say, nope, that's okay, we can't change it. Maybe we have to hire somebody else, and then you'll end it. But that's a decision you have to make for yourself. And just know that once you accept the assignment and you get once the chain of event, once it starts happening and you've confirmed with the borrowers and all this stuff, you're obligating yourself to it, to follow, unless you have to break it for a health or safety reason. If you are sick, if you're in an accident, or you get there and obviously the signers are sick, then those are reasons you would want to cancel on your own. But then you have to abide by whatever rules that they've set in place.
So what I have been getting is there's a signing. Are you able to do this? Either yes, I'm available, no, I'm available, and then there's a box under there that says if you need to make this later, or, adjust, negotiate the terms.
Right.
Put that here. So how does that work? If I just mark the yes, I'm available.
So if you say yes, you're agreeing to that price.
Okay.
So always negotiate.
Okay.
Especially if they're saying, hey, here's what you've got, and it's $90, but they haven't told you where it's at. They haven't told you what kind of a signing or how many signers.
Yes.
So I'll put it down there. They'll say, here's your price, and then there's the negotiate, and I'll just, you can write it whatever you want. You could say, one signer, no scan backs, this rate, and just put your prices there, because sometimes you have to make a guess based on. If you just put a number there, if you say, no, I don't want to accept 90 or whatever price that they're offering, and you put a number down there, then that's the number you've agreed to then. Now, I've done that before, and then I come back and find out, oh, it's actually 2 signers. It's quite a ways away. It's 250 pages, and I've got to print 2 sets of those, and there's scan backs required. So I just put the blurb in there. So that's where you have to figure out for yourselves, what to put for negotiating your price. Sometimes it'll be, yes, I'll accept it if the price is right. If they've disclosed enough information to me, and I can discern, like how much work it's going to be, I'll either accept it or negotiate. 99% of the times I have to negotiate it, because they're in it to make money. They want to hire you at the least. They want their profit margin to be as high as it can. But since we've gone through this part here, this is a good transition. This is a good transition to move over to our loan package now, okay? This is a refi. And the reason I chose refi is simple, because that represents about 70% of all the signings you'll do as a signing agent. And if you can do this refi with 2 signers, you can do a refi with 1 signer. I mean, a refi is a good way to get your feet wet, and it's going to expose you to more documents. So refi is a good one to start with, I promise you. Okay, so let's look at first the anatomy of this package as we have it, okay? So the first page is just a cover page. Obviously, your loan package doesn't look like this. So this is a sample refinance loan package with 2 borrowers, Okay, so this whole sample refi is 103 pages. It includes the cover sheet, instructions, document descriptions, and suggested opening and closing script for signing that I've written, plus the shipping label and sample loan docs. Okay, so the shipping label and the sample loan documents and the notary instructions, those are things that come from the signer. It's going to be really obvious which things are coming from me that I've written for you, because obviously they're not going to send you a script that says, hello, my name is. That's just me practicing, okay? So let's look at the anatomy of it. We want to keep it in stacking order, in the same, and that's good practice. Remember, as signing agents, we're dealing with a whole mess of loose documents. We've got a clippy, so I'm just going to have you work from right to left. So we're going to look at the document and then face down. As you turn the page, you're going to put it face down, okay? Like this. So I'm going to do this to keep it in stacking order, because this is good practice, because remember, this is what you're going to do at the signing table. You've got the document in front of you, and then they're going to sign it, and then it goes face down, okay? So this page here, it says NSA assignment. So this is a really small, ridiculous small font, I apologize, but this is a typical exchange, how your loan assignment is going to come into you. It's either going to be, typically via phone. This is an example of a phone conversation. And so I'm going to play the role of the XYZ signing service, okay? I'm going to be XYZ signing service. And do you want to be the NSA? Do you want to be the notary signing agent? Okay. And are you going to be able to pick up her sound, or is it just going to be my voice, probably?
I can.
And are you okay with your voice being here? Okay. Okay, so XYZ signing service. Oops, I'm sorry. I just ruined my own rules. Stay within the frame. Hello, this is Nina with XYZ Signing. Are you available for a refi loan signing tomorrow, Saturday, March 21st at 6 p.m. in Finite, Washington?
Hi, Nina. Yes, I'm available, and I would love to help. How many signers do we have, and are scanbacks required?
Right. So, and that's a question I ask every time, because sometimes they don't give us all the information we have, because I know the next question out of her mouth is going to be, how much do you charge? She's a scheduler. She's just trying to get these assigned and off her table as quickly as she can. Okay. And so for me to know how much to charge her, I have to ask her questions, and I try to extract that as quickly and painlessly as I can. Okay, so how many signers and are scanbacks required? She's already told me it's in Finite, Washington, and in my mind, I've Googled it. Finite is a fictional city. I've just made it up. So in my mind, mentally, okay, well, I know where Finite is, so roughly how far that's going to be, but I need to know what kind, and I know it's a refi. But now I need to know how many signers and are scanbacks required. So she says, there are 2 signers and no scanbacks. What would your rate be for that?
My rate would be XYZ for 2 signers and no scanbacks. Are the loan documents ready now?
And I always ask that, because sometimes they'll try and schedule you way in advance. And it's really hard when you accept an assignment way in advance, because then maybe you can't receive any other assignment earlier that day, because you end up waiting for loan documents, and it's such a huge pain to have to wait for loan documents. So I'm asking, are the loan documents ready now? And she says, yes, loan documents are great. Yes, loan documents are ready now. I've just emailed your assignment confirmation, and in a minute you'll receive another email with the loan documents with a shipping label and the signing instructions.
Perfect. Okay, so I see your confirmation in my inbox, and I will call the borrowers now to confirm our appointment. Hey, Nina, while I have you on the phone, can you please verify for me whether the borrowers understand they're required to bring a check for cash to close, just so there are no surprises at the signing table? Right,
and so that's because this is happening simultaneously. So I'm on the phone with her, and then I see your confirmation has come in, and that's the email down below, and that's how I know. Sometimes you don't know, and but I'll pick up the phone and I'll call, or I'll email and say, do the borrowers know that they have to bring a cash to close, so that there is no surprise. And XYZ says, yes, the borrowers have been instructed by the loan officer to bring a cashier's check for $945 to closing, so they should already be prepared, but please remind them again when you call to confirm, and be sure to collect that cashier's check and include it with the return loan documents. Thank you so much for asking.
Okay, I noted it. And thanks for giving me a call today, and I'll be sure to let you know if I have any questions. Have a great one.
Okay, so I tell them I'll make a note of it, and I do. Any extra things that they're telling me over the phone, I jot it down and make a note of it. And I'm telling them that if I have questions about the documents that I've just received, I will be calling them back. And that's what you do. So if you have questions about the instructions they've given you, that's who you're going to call. And if you have questions about the actual documents themselves, that's who you're going to call. There's a different number that you're going to call once you're at the signing table, because you're not going to call the schedule. You're not going to call them. You're going to call there's a specific number that they're going to give you that you'll follow. So then below shows, if you look at the email, it's got the confirmation date. This was received yesterday. You can see the email was received yesterday. This is for today's date, March 21st. The signing's at 6 o'clock tonight. Dear fabulous, your name. Dear fabulous signing agent, you have successfully confirmed the following scheduled appointment. You will receive a separate email notifying you when the documents are available. The lender is Beta Financial and the title company is Alpha Title and Escrow. Your fee is negotiated with Beta Financial, but your payment will be coming from XYZ Services, LLC. And they want to say that to you because make sure you understand you're not collecting money from the signers. You're not even discussing fees or whatever with the signers. You're just there to do the signing. Any questions regarding your fees, et cetera, is between you and the title company. But they're telling you you're doing this on behalf of Beta Financial and Alpha Title and Escrow. And that's what you're going to say when you call to confirm the appointment with the borrowers. Hi, this is Carmen Lane. This is Carmen Lane. I'm a notary signing agent, and I've been assigned to your loan signing tomorrow at 6 p.m. And it gives me the date. I'm going to 123 Cascade Street, Finite, Washington. And so this is me on the phone confirming with the borrowers. Jane A. Signer, John Q. Signer, and you both have valid picture ID? Yes. Okay. 2 forms of ID? Yes. And I understand that there's a check that a cashier's check that you have to present for closing. It's $945. And will you have that ready? Yes, we will. Okay, great. And that way there's no, or if they're saying, well, I've never heard of this before. Well, then that's when you're on the phone. Oh, you haven't? Well, your lender should have explained that to you. I'll get a message to them to, I'll let them know, but also you pick up the phone if you've got a number to call directly and get that sorted out. So I'm notifying my hiring company if they're acting like it's a big surprise. And otherwise, in this case, in our example, lenders are like, the borrowers rather are aware of the check. They've got ID, they're going to have their check. They confirm the address. It's really important to confirm the address because I've had it where the hiring company has given me a city. Oh, here's the address, and that's in Bethel, Washington, they said. So I'm confirming the address with the signers. They're like, Bethel? No, we're in Spanaway. Oh, okay, well that's good to know. Or the signing location is different, because remember, data entry, human error, they make mistakes, and so I'll give the address to the borrowers, confirm it. If it's wrong, then they're going to correct me, and I'm going to notify the hiring company that, hey, this is actually the address. And it's important because if all the documents are wrong with the wrong address, that's one thing. Chances are it's just whoever did the assignment wrote it to me wrong. I'm sure the lender knows what the actual address is, but just in case, I've done my job by notifying them that the address is different from what they have. And then see at the bottom, there's fees. Right? So this is an email that's your signers are never going to see. They're confirming to you what the fee is. Now, you've agreed to a price on that phone call. If you get this email and there's a different price here, and it's like, and it's happened before, I say, hey, got your confirmation, but the price is wrong, that rate is wrong. I bring it to their attention because I'm not going to accept it. If I accept it, we say one thing over the phone, but what's in writing is what's enforceable. right? So they're like, oh yeah, my bad, I'll correct that for you. And so they'll correct it. And they're telling us right off the bat, 2 forms of ID, so I know what to tell the borrowers to be ready for. You need 2 forms of ID, okay, you need to have a cashier's check, okay. And then instructions about billing. Question?
So 2 forms of ID does that mean, because there's 2 signers?
Right?
So is that a total of 4 different things that I'm looking at?
Each person,
Mrs. has to have 2?
and not 2, no, it's not 2 forms of ID per grouping. It's like, if John and Jane Signer are supposed to sign and 2 forms of ID are required, that means 2 forms of ID for Mr. Signer, 2 forms of ID for Mrs. Signer.
That's my message.
Yep,
So that
yeah.
is a total of 4 different
Yep,
items that I'm looking at.
right.
Okay.
Now, for filling out your notary journal, you just have to note 1 in your notary journal. You could put a note there that they also had military ID or what their secondary ID was, and that you saw it.
Okay.
But for capturing for your notary journal, you just 1. You can just say what you saw. Washington driver's license, issue date this, expiration date this. But yeah, so when they say 2 forms of ID, that's per signer,
Okay.
per signer. Or sometimes you'll have a non-borrowing spouse. There'll be a husband and wife, and so sometimes they're co-borrowers. In this instance, we're going to have they're both borrowers. Sometimes it's a couple, but one is the borrower, the other is the spouse, right? And there may be some documents, and I'll explain to them. If it's a non-borrowing spouse situation, there's going to be documents for Mr. Signer to sign, or and then some for both of you to sign. And some for both, and then also some for me to notarize. But I prepare them so they're not going, hey, why is it only Mr. Signer? Well, sometimes the primary breadwinner is the borrower, and the spouse may just be, just a co-signer. But there are certain things, if they're not a borrower, they shouldn't be signing certain things. And they'll call that out to your attention on the documents. Because if there's a signing spot, sometimes there'll be 2 lines, and just Mr. Smith's name or Mr. Signer's name is on there, but not Mrs. Signer, just Mr. Signer. Mr. Signer's going to sign. Mrs. Signer wouldn't, unless her name appears there. It says, John Q. Signer, Jane A. Signer. But you'll come across that. It'll be self-explanatory, I think, when you get to it. All right. So these are our instructions. So I know where to go. If I have questions, who to call if I have questions regarding the assignment. Okay? And so I'm turning the next page, and it's XYZ signing services. These are now the signing agent instructions. Sometimes they'll send you the signing agent instructions and the label, and that'll be ready, but then the loan documents aren't ready. Sometimes they give it to you all at once, and God bless the people that send it to you all together. It's one less thing to keep track of for me, is how I feel about it. So they're giving us instructions here, and you can tell how important they are by the size of the font, whether they've bolded it, and the caps and all that stuff, and what's at the top. Obviously, look at the bottom is how to get paid. That's their least. They're least concerned about us getting paid. I'm just joking. But so at the top it says, reminder, never discuss loan terms, rates, fees, disbursements, or funding process or timeline with the borrowers. For any questions from the borrower specific to the loan transaction that arise during the signing ceremony, please refer the borrowers to the contract info contained therein. Okay. So that's just a reminder. And remember, this is a set of these are a set of instructions for this assignment, for this loan signing. Every signing company, every hiring company will have a different assignment for you, and typically different instructions. So I'm not going to use this set of instructions for every single loan signing I ever face. I'm using it specific for this signing. Okay. Sometimes they are the same. If it's a company, you'll get a rhythm. The certain things that they expect, and you'll get a rhythm. But so I'm looking through, and it's telling me the loan package is a mixture of both legal and letter-sized paper. Please follow the printing instructions. Okay, and do not shrink pages. So that must be pretty important to them. print 2 copies, it says, which is, I always do, print 2 copies, 1 copy to execute, 1 copy to leave with the borrower. Do not email, okay? Obviously, I'm never going to email the borrowers, ever. I'm going to go through my hiring company, or whoever's hired me is who I'm going to correspond with. Use blue ink only to sign. Sometimes they'll say they don't care. It'll say use black or blue. So then you just use whatever you prefer. Sometimes you'll get instructions that say use black or blue, but then you actually get the loan documents and it'll say, oh, use blue only, or it'll say, oh, use black only. Whatever's the most restrictive, you're going to follow the most restrictive instruction. And then I've got samples of blue and black pen, and I try to write off to begin with. If I know I'm using blue ink only to sign, then I'm taking this and I'm circling blue ink only, or I'm writing somewhere in my notes mentally blue ink only. Okay. Okay. Blue ink, 2 forms of ID. So they're telling us again. We already know of 2 forms of ID. No exceptions. Patriot Act form. I think they mean form. Patriot Act must be filled out in full, confirming that you've witnessed both forms of ID. Filled out in full, confirming, okay. Borrowers must provide a cashier's check for $945, payable to blah, 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 okay. Borrower name and loan number should be written in the memo line. The borrowers do not have a cashier's check at signing. You must stop and call this number immediately. And so where it says borrowers, this is their instruction. They want the borrower to write their name, their last name, and the loan number. I have them do it. I don't want to be responsible for writing the wrong number down. So I just instruct them to do it. And the only exception I might make to that is if it's an elderly person and they're really struggling with their writing, or they're worried that their writing, the numbers may come up. A signature is fine. You know, it could be a shaky signature, but sometimes shaky numbers can be hard for the other person to read. So with their permission, if they want me to, I will write it for them. But as a rule, I don't volunteer to do anything like that. They will also typically have if they're having to provide like a voided check, in an example with a voided check, and they want to write down their routing number or bank number, the routed check is going to be their correction. So whoever's doing the paperwork, if they've got the voided check to copy the numbers from, that way you don't have to write it yourself. It's somebody else is doing it. But in this case, it's a cashier's check, so there's no routing number to deal with. Let's see, where are we at? So 945, okay, if they don't have it, we've got to stop. Okay, so now this is where they start getting into, we're going to pay you this much, but if you start making mistakes, they're going to start dinging you. And this is where you're reading ahead. And if you read through, okay, well, if the closing documents are not returned, signed, and completed, that will result in the closing being complete, and failure to submit a completed package is going to result in 50% reduction of the full fee, and that includes any pages that are cut off. So now we're getting into some restrictions there. They're like, we're going to pay you this much, but guess what? If you make mistakes, it's going to cost you. And so that prompts you to do what? Be a bit more careful with everything, because we want to get paid. Of course, we naturally want to do it correctly and right, but now they're letting us know that it's going to cost us money. In the event we don't, it's going to cost us money. And so if we don't agree with any of this that they're saying, this is when we write back and say, I'm not cool with this. You need to find a different signer or whatever. Okay. But otherwise, if you get this in your email and you go forward, you've just accepted these as terms. This becomes a contract between you and your hiring company. Okay. So, okay, cancellations. If the borrower cancels before the signing and documents have been printed, they're going to give you a $25 print fee. Well, sometimes companies will give you a $40 print fee. Every company is different. Okay. And then what happens if the borrower cancels after the signing agent has departed? You get a print fee and a travel fee. If the borrower cancels during the signing appointment, they'll get 50% signing fee plus travel fee. You know, it's all. Every company is going to handle this differently, and this is a fake signing company. Okay. Both borrowers must initial the. Okay, so this is. Oh no, I skipped a spot here.
Notary acknowledgements.
Okay. Notary acknowledgements are important to complete correctly. We already know this. Loans cannot fund with incomplete acknowledgements. We know this. Failure to complete the acknowledgements in full will result in $10 deduction. Okay, so there are more restrictions here. So of course we want to do it correctly. We want to notarize correctly. But it's going to cost us money if we don't. Borrowers must sign all 3 copies of the RTC, which is the right to cancel. Signing agent must leave 2 signed copies of the RTC with the borrowers, the right to cancel with the borrowers, return 1 signed copy with the rest of the loan documents. This is an important one, you can tell because it's in all caps. Borrowers, then the next one is, which caught my attention, the borrowers must initial each page of the note where indicated and sign as indicated. So that's a special, I'm going to make a note to myself about that one. If you're late, of course, if you're going to be late, they want to know, you have to call. And then in big bold, this is what I appreciate in my instructions is, who do I call at the signing table if the borrower has questions? And then what to do after a successful signing. And in this case, they've even gotten so specific as to say they want to use a legal-sized envelope, do not bend or fold documents. Of course, we know we would never bend or fold a loan document, but so they have to put it in here because apparently somebody must have done it, right? And then where to drop. As a rule, I never drop it at a drop box because I don't get a receipt. I don't have proof in my hand that I've done that drop and I really want it. So some people will say never use a drop box, just come the next morning and do it, and then you have to follow that. You have to follow them. And these people are being specific. They want a picture of the drop receipt and they want it emailed. Okay. And then the last thing on, like I said, on their priority is how do you get paid? Well, you have to invoice them within 30 days. And I invoice them that night. When I'm done with the signing, my job, I can't go to bed until I've sent that invoice out because I don't want to add it to my ticker list of things to do the next day.
So you personally have an invoice template that you created, or
Microsoft.
do
They're not going to offer you it. No,
Okay.
they won't. You could just, Microsoft has templates you could use. Any template you could use. But they specifically want an invoice and you have to email it to them. Other companies, the payment is automatically, as soon as, like if you are signed up with a signing company and requires you to log in and you change the status of the signing online, as soon as you change that status to closed, it triggers their system to stack it up for payment,
Okay.
right? And so then sending an invoice separately would be annoying to them. They wouldn't want it. These folks, that they rely on the invoice. But as a rule, it's something that's done automatically for most signing companies. If it's a smaller one or maybe not so, the bigger signing companies, will typically have you just log in or you email them. You email them that it's complete and that they trigger it in their own system that it's ready. All right, so let's turn the page over. You see where it says at the top of the page, John and Jane Signer, John Q. Signer. And on that, let's see. I know I have it on this one whole piece of paper, but I normally wouldn't write that on a piece of paper like this. It's going to be on a note. I'm going to handwrite it on a note that has today's date to remind myself of the date of the signing. And even, what I would write is also the county, because sometimes we do different notarizations in different counties. And yesterday, I almost mistakenly called the county Grays Harbor, but I was not. I was very much in Pacific County, and so I had to remind myself. What I had to do is I wrote Pacific, so to remind myself of the county, and also to remind the signers that they need to assign. They're going to sign their signature exactly as it is on the documents. So this is just an example of a script for this particular loan package. So if you wanted to take this home and practice on your own tonight, this is how you would do it. And the documents, so the first page is hello, my name is, right? This is you're greeting them, okay? And then at the signing table, and you're gonna develop your own pattern, your own thing to say, and it'll be natural for you. So you could use this as a guide and then type it up create one in your own words so that it feels natural for you. But this is just a guide. And so the first part is the welcome. You're introducing yourself. I'm Carmen Lane. I'm a notary signing agent. I'm independent, but I'm here on behalf of Beta Financial and Alpha Title and Escrow, right? You're here on behalf of them. And you may or may not be showing the ID outside because it depends on what the weather's doing, right? If it's pouring down rain, you're not going to be, all of this is fluid. It just depends on what feels natural. If you're outside and it's pouring down rain, you're not going to make them stand outside in the rain and get the documents wet while you do your spiel. Okay, so let's turn the page over. Well, actually, before we turn the page, you've asked for the IDs and you've done the notary journals right off the top, right? You want to make sure that's the first thing you do. But even before that, when we're sitting down at the table, you're going to do whatever works best for you, but how I like to do it is I like to have them across from me. It's especially important now because of the COVID-19 concerns. We need to allow extra space, right? I like to have them across the table from me where I could still reach and hand them documents. But I work like this, and I go through the document and then I hand it to them. You know, I'm talking about it, pointing. I hand it to them. They sign it to me, and then it goes face down. Or actually, this stuff is like, if you could picture this over like this, this is how I work. And I like to have the main signer across the table from me, and then if there's a secondary signer to the right of them. And I try to do that the same way each time. You have to go with whatever restrictions you have. I showed up yesterday at a signing, and it was a coffee table we worked on. She had a small little home. She didn't have a dining room table to work on. So I had her still sit across from me, but we used her little coffee table, and she just cleared it off as best she could. And that's how I worked. And then I was on a couch, so I had stuff behind me that I was, you know. But you just have to be flexible and try to take control of it ahead of time, so that it fits you. And I'll say something like, hey, I'm going to be a little bit bossy right now. If I could, especially if they already sat down, if it's okay, can I get Mr. Signer to sit here, and then Mrs. Signer, can you sit there? Because then it'll go to Mr. Signer or whoever's first, Mrs. Signer. In this case, it's going to be Mrs. Signer who's first. So Mrs. Signer, then she's going to sign a document, and then she passes it to Mr. Signer, and then they pass it back to me, and then it goes face down. But that way, it's not, you know, it's easy to keep track of. Okay, and then always you asking if there's any questions before you begin. And usually that's when they're going to jump in with, well, hey, yes, before we start, what is my loan amount, or what is my monthly payment going to be? And that's where having tabbed the documents ahead of time is going to help. And so the next 2 pages is the list of loan documents in order. And that's not how the loan package comes. Like I said, all this stuff so far is just me. Well, the instructions are real. That comes from your signing company. This list of loan documents in order is this loan package here. So, for that, for now, let's put it face down. I print their copy so that it has the label on it, and it's not. The main reason is just because it's got this tracking number right here. And what I'll do is, if this is their copy, you know, I'll say, hey, obviously my copy isn't going to be a piece of paper like this. It'll be actually on the envelope, on the FedEx envelope. On their loan copy, it will be like this. This is how I'll hand it to them. It'll be a clippy on it like this. I'll have my business card there, and I'll say, this is your copy for your records. Right? But then on the sides are all the documents that I said put a star next to. They're going to be tabbed out. So this is the set we're going to execute, right? So we're going to put the label face down. And I keep this one. This is printing instructions, and they come with printing instructions because there's a lot of issues for signing agents printing, and things get cut off, and they're giving you some troubleshooting. Number 1, make sure you're opening the document in Adobe Acrobat Reader. You've downloaded it. Sometimes Google will say, we'll want to just view it. You choose the option to view. And if you try to print from that view, it's going to be a mess. So when you download the document, make sure you right click on the file name, open with Adobe Acrobat Reader. And then it'll open it up in Adobe Acrobat Reader. And then you want to print from Adobe Acrobat Reader. If you run into problems, they've got some troubleshooting for you here. But it comes down to the settings on your laptop, or excuse me, on your printer and on your computer. So if you're running into print issues, you can call them and see if they'll help you. But bear in mind that there's so many different types of printers out there, they may not be able to troubleshoot the printing issue with your specific printer. So just practice printing legal size and letter size documents. The bottom of this page is just something to add that I added on, a note from me, just to say that this loan package is a mix of legal and letter size paper, but for the purpose of the workshop, I've got everything crammed down, shrunk down. If it's on a legal site, if it's a legal document, legal size document, I've shrunk it down to fit on a letter size paper. Okay for this workshop, not okay in real life, okay? Okay. So what I want to do is keep these the documents that we have face down. We'll keep those face down for now. What we're going to go through now is we're going to go through, and this is where the interactive part. So this is where we're going to. Whoops! I'm going to put this here. We're going to pause for a second. Pause recording, and then we're going to take a few minutes, and we're going to tab all the places that require signatures. Okay. The first few documents won't, and that's okay. But we're going to pause the recording, and we're going to go through and just put the signature tabs on all the spots that need signatures.